We are approaching February 5. It's a huge date, not just for presidential primaries, but in the state of Pennsylvania. The governor will address the Pennsylvania legislature with his annual budget message. And you'll see who my guest is when we return.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. And again, as always, thanks for watching. Well, I know there's all kinds of interest next week in the myriad primaries and caucuses that will take place, but the governor of Pennsylvania, Edward G. Rendell, will deliver an important message to the General Assembly. It's its budget address. It doesn't get any better than this. We have the governor's top policy guru, Donna Cooper, with us to talk with us about a whole bunch of things. Donna, welcome as always.
Great to be
here. Now,
here.
I never give you your title. I always call you the policy guru. You all right with that?
Totally fine.
I'm not going to get a call from the big guy.
I like the whole idea of guru. I kind of like that.
Well, look, as always, it's great to have you on the program. Let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about in this half hour. Economy not doing so well. We don't have to get into the reasons why. Revenue's falling off in state by state. Looks like our state still has a surplus, but, and you know where the buts are going, if the revenues fall off, increased demands for spending, what are we going to see, or what do you see in the governor's office as you prepare this budget? Give us a preview about what you think what the economy will be like and how it will affect our state's budget.
Well, I think there's two things. First, I think we're really fortunate that the last 5 years have been great. We have a record number of Pennsylvanians working. We've done about $2.3 billion in business tax cuts, of which over $1 billion are recurring. So while the national economy is faltering, Pennsylvania is not doing as bad as many other states that really didn't pay attention to getting their business climate and their jobs climate in place in the last 5 years. So we have some good news, but there's no question that the credit crisis, the bond market crisis, everything is going to have an impact on slowing down the economy in PA. And the question is, can a state take some action to stimulate the economy, augmented by, hopefully, federal action, and protect the job growth that we've had and continue it. Our goal is to continue it.
Yeah, now your boss has been pretty clear that there'll be no new taxes. He's made that argument. Now, you don't have to give us a sneak preview. We'll find out, in a couple days. And he's also said that, he's going to try to do everything he can not to cut programs. Now, you know what happens in recessions. You've got either raise taxes and or cut programs because the state has to balance its budget constitutionally. Cannot, do what the federal government does, which add more debt.
Right. Well, one of the ways we're making it possible not to cut programs is we're cutting the waste out of government. And I don't mean that in a cliche. At this point, we've saved the taxpayers of Pennsylvania $1.2 billion. So had we not done that, we would have had to cut this year $1.2 billion in programs. So, for instance, in our welfare budget, just because of the number of seniors and disabled going into nursing homes, our public assistance budget would have grown by about $1 billion. But we're putting cost containment measures in continually. So that growth is slowed by about $400 million. Just by putting better cost containment measures on the table. So instead of cutting programs, we're trying to run them more smartly, more efficiently, and make sure that we get better quality for the taxpayers. So, Tara, I don't envision a budget where you'll be hearing a lot about program cuts. Unfortunately, other states will have to do that. Yeah. You won't hear about us having the resources either to do great program expansion.
So it'll be kind of a hold-the-line budget now. All things being even, I think you would agree with this, and, I've said this on a number of occasions, and we don't care if you're like Governor Rendell or not. That's not my point. It's that it's rare to find a governor in his second term who's got this kind of ambitious agenda. I mean, it is hugely ambitious, kind of set the legislature back on its heels because they're used by now by saying, okay, we're going to go do what we want to do, the heck with the governor. But are you folks... Is this basically going to be a kind of hold the line with, there just isn't any money to do any big new programs, is there?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to try and do is talk with the legislature about what role Pennsylvania can play in the national effort to stimulate the economy. And we will be putting forward some new proposals that we think will put more money into the economy because we need to continue business investment and consumer spending. If we take a downturn in that, it's Pennsylvanians who will lose jobs. So you will hear next week about some new initiatives to stimulate the economy that are predicated on the Fed's taking action. Now, if they take a lot of action, there's less pressure on us. But there's no question that we need to stay ahead of the curve to continue the growth.
All right, I'm chatting with Donna Cooper. She's the Secretary of Policy and Planning in the Governor's Office, Governor's top policy advisor. We'll be back after these words and continue with our discussion.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. I'm talking with Donna Cooper. She's Governor Ed Rendell's top policy advisor. All right. I mean, one of the big issues that the governor has been running around the state, and I mean literally running around the state talking about and trying to get the legislature to do something, is to so-called cover all Pennsylvanians. He wants to, increase coverage for folks who don't have, give coverage to folks who don't have health care, maybe 800, 900,000, depending on how you count them. And boy, he's gotten pretty, your boss has gotten pretty outspoken. He says one might go into these legislative districts and lean on some of these legislators. Is he serious about that?
Well, we're really serious about covering the uninsured. And I think one of the challenges is that in a lot of legislative districts, people are not spending enough time with the people in their own communities who are uninsured. And we want to make sure we close that communication gap, that people who are uninsured can speak to their elected officials about what it's like to have to make the decisions that they have to make every day between paying for medicines or paying for food.
Now, you've done some palliatives in a sense. I mean, you're expanding adult basic and some of these other programs. But let's go to the heart of this. I mean, if we're going to cover 800,000, 900,000 people, is that the goal?
Yes.
You got to find a way to pay for it.
Correct.
And that has been at the heart of the controversy. I mean, no one... Do you hear real opposition to saying, let's do it, or is it about how it gets paid for?
Well, I think primarily anything in a political process is where's the money going to come from.
Oh, amen.
And we're lucky in PA that we have accumulated a surplus in a particular account called the Healthcare Provider Retention Account. And that money spins off money to help pay medical malpractice claims.
M-Care Fund.
M-Care Fund, yeah. And it also, but it has enough money to both pay towards med-mal and contribute to the cost of covering the uninsured. But it's not the only fund.
But that's a temporary program. That's, I mean,
No.
Well, no, the M-Care Fund has to be renewed annually by the legislature, right?
No, the abatement for doctors has to be renewed annually, but the fund is not temporary. It's there. And it has over close to $500 million there.
Where does that money come from?
That money comes from the 25-cent increase in the cigarette tax that occurred.
Go ahead.
So by and large, that's what's the money in that fund that's surplus, because fortunately for Pennsylvanians, med-mal payments are dropping. Fortunately for doctors, they're dropping. And fortunately, we have less med-mal claims. So our medical environment's getting better. We need less of those resources to deal with medical malpractice issues. We can spend some of that money.
So is that the big hurdle?
The big hurdle is, yes. I mean, because there's not a lot of dispute. Should we tap greater federal dollars? Should we redirect the funds that are in adult basic? But it's really, there's a little bit of a hole, and can we use the funds that have surplus in this account to fill that hole? And we're working very closely with the medical societies and the hospital associations to really think through maximizing how we use those monies to cover the uninsured and meet our health care med-mal needs. And that's a debate we're in right now, and I think it's a healthy debate because I think the doctors are very committed to covering the uninsured, but they also want to know they're going to get security on their med-mal cost.
Yeah, okay. So it's that balance that you're trying to achieve. Now, just briefly, because I want to go on to some other subjects, you've already done some things in the health care area within the last...
So we are the first state to have passed a law requiring that hospitals take action to drive down hospital-acquired infections. We've expanded...
And just by the way, if I remember, a press release from the Hospital Association agreed with you all about not paying, is it for...
Never events or avoidable medical errors, yes.
And so you and the Hospital Association are on the same wavelength.
Sure,
there. Well, that's
right.
always good when
Yeah.
you know. Go ahead, keep going.
And the hospitals support the fact that we passed the legislation on hospital-acquired infections.
Right.
Hospitals do a plan. They have to reduce the infection rate by 10% a year, and we give them resources and benefits to do that.
And they would point out health care acquired because they're more than just in
Yes,
hospitals.
this is
so
true.
we got to
Thank
get
you.
that. That's all right.
That's good. We also expanded the kinds of services that nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, physicians assistants can offer, so we're increasing access to health care. We're hoping that there'll be action in the legislature on the smoking ban. There's a House and Senate
boy, do we want to
compromise committee, but that would be terrific.
I want to stop you there. I mean, if that, first of all, it's popular. I mean, and I'm supposed to be a little neutral on the program. I mean, it's one thing I do think that we can work this out, but boy, it is enjoyable to go into restaurants and
right.
and have a glass of wine and a meal and not have. And they've done it in other states, and it doesn't seem to have hurt business. I mean, are you optimistic about that? I mean,
totally, yes.
Yeah, something needs. And I understand we can argue about the exemptions. So, what's your position on the exempt? I mean, everybody wants to take part of it and say, well, we'll exempt casinos, we'll accept certain the so-called cigar bars.
Right.
Do you have a hard-line position on that?
No, we don't have a hard-line position. What we've said is that we think that there should be as few exemptions as possible, but we recognize that there's certain places that people may still want to smoke.
Yeah.
So a cigar bar wouldn't exist if you can't smoke a cigar in it.
Sure.
So, okay, I don't think there's a lot of argument over that. And I actually think that the exemptions conversation is one that will be easy to have a meeting of the minds. The real challenge is getting people in the room to have a meeting of the minds.
Oh, gee, I don't want to hear that. You can't even get them into the room. We got to get. I mean, that is one thing. I think first of all, the voters support it. All right, I'm chatting with Donna Cooper. She's Governor Rendell's top policy advisor. We're going to move on and talk. Maybe what do you want to do? You want to do energy?
Well, I think energy is good because energy and healthcare are both things that we tried to get done last year.
We'll do energy next. Governor Rendell is going to make his address on Tuesday, coming Tuesday. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Donna Cooper, Governor Rendell's policy director. Donna, let's talk a little bit about energy. I mean, we've, on this program over the last several months, we've had folks on various points of view about it. And, the governor wants to make these monies available. I guess he originally proposed, was it $850 million?
Yeah.
And now there is this compromise with the Senate. Most of the problems, I think, coming from the Senate. The Senate's up to $650 million, but there's some huge differences in how long the time would be. What does the governor really want to do with the energy proposal? I mean, explain it to our viewers.
There's two parts. First, we want to increase the degree to which the fuels in Pennsylvania are dependent on cellulosic and other forms of ethanol, and we want to so that we create the demand for the final solution on ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, and clean up our fuels and be dependent on less of fossil fuels. So that's one part. That's Penn Fuels. That's passed the House. It's sitting in the Senate. The Senate passed a version that takes ethanol out. We don't think that even given the federal legislation, they didn't take ethanol out. They just said we need to increasingly shift our ethanol base from corn to cellulosic, and that's what Pennsylvania should do. And that would put Pennsylvania square in the top of the market on ethanol.
I'm not an expert on this, but, I mean, most people say that corn is just sort of a transition. Is that right?
I think corn is more than a transition right now. We're dependent on corn right now, but we don't have to be.
But down the line,
Yes.
it would be more cellulose-based.
Which is great for PA. I mean,
Yeah, I
we'll be at
understand.
the front of the jobs on that.
Yeah, is that straw grass and all that?
Switchgrass and wood products and
Yeah.
you know, waste wood products.
Yeah.
So that's one part. The other part is putting $850 million to work in building an alternative energy economy, whether it's developing alternative fuels, research and development and conservation practices, helping businesses put energy conservation systems in place, helping consumers put solar panels on their roofs, get energy efficient air conditioners. Basically, we want to retool homes and businesses so that they're more energy efficient, and we want to invest in companies that are going to put Pennsylvania in the front of the energy economy.
Now, is the debate here again, I mean, it seems to me, again, the debate is over how much money, how it gets funded, not so much, you know, whether it should be done at all. I mean, I think originally it was a question about whether it should be done at all. There was not a great reaction when you all sent it over to the legislature, particularly in the Senate, but Senate Republicans, you know, have been a little leery of this. Are you now down to a discussion of how it gets done, not so much what gets done?
Absolutely. I think the Senate Republicans were really clear last July when they sent us a letter saying, you know, we're committed to getting the energy package done. We need to work with you on how to do that. And I think we're in those stages of negotiations. I mean, another issue on the table relating to all this is the expiration of the rate caps on electricity bills.
Yeah, we had John Hanger on, who was on the PUC, Public
Yes.
Utilities Commission, and actually I think may have been the architect. He said deregulation has to go, that the marketplace has to take hold.
Absolutely,
Now,
but
that
we have
should
some
make
price spikes, and we need to think about what that means.
I understand, but that should make everybody happy. I mean, at least the business community is not going to be upset about that. But I won't tell you, I just got my electric bill. You know what I'm going to say now, don't you? My wife takes the electric bill on. Honey, do you see how much this bill has jumped?
That's before your rate cap comes off. And in fact, lots of businesses in PA are very concerned about the rate caps coming off because they're high utility users. So we need to have a conversation very urgently connected with the energy package that says, we're not saying don't take the rate caps off, but we need to think about that in a way that we don't further put Pennsylvania behind the economic curve.
Yeah. Before we go to a break, but Hanger's point about this was that for so long the market didn't set the rate, and at some point you can't.
Absolutely.
The market has to come back into play, or you get these inefficiencies.
I think there's no debate about that. I think the question is, given the spike that will occur, do you have that happen all at once? Or how do you phase that in over time so that people can budget for the changes?
All right, there was a big study. It's called the Costing Out Study. It has to do with how much money we put into education and how we should spend that money. Final segment with Donna Cooper in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back for the final segment of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Donna Cooper, let's talk about this big costing out study. It's got a lot of publicity. We had folks on, by the way, the chairman of the state board and some other folks to chat about it. Well, first of all, explain costing out study to our viewers.
Pennsylvania legislature said we need to know how much it costs to ensure that every kid in PA gets a quality education, and the term for quality these days is now adequate. Do they have adequate resources to offer them a quality education? And basically that study found that a majority of our districts, an overwhelming majority, do not have adequate resources. And so the real challenge for Pennsylvania at the state level and at the local level is how do we ensure that the districts have sufficient resources to offer every kid an adequate education or a high quality education. So the legislature asked for that report. They got it in the fall. And now everybody needs to think about what does that mean. And I think for the governor what that means is it's a terrific place to continue the conversation about the need for more education investments.
Well, let me ask you this question. I mean, the big debate in our state has been about switching, lowering the property tax or eliminating it and finding a tax that covers it. You know, the revenues lost by the school property tax, and everybody would agree that the school property tax is not the best way to fund. I mean, very few people come on here and articulate the other view. But almost no one has been talking about increasing the funding.
Right. Well, the debate that has occurred in the legislature is about taxes, because that's a good debate to have to go home and tell your well, even a shift to go home and tell your district, I've been fighting to lower your property taxes. And but there are people in Pennsylvania, lots of people, who also want to have a conversation about how do we improve our schools, and does it make sense?
And the linkage between the two?
And the linkage between the two. I mean, look, one of the reasons people's property taxes are high, they are not so high, but they are high, is that we are not at the state level putting enough on the table to fund the schools. And that's why the study is so timely.
So that means finding a source of funding in addition to finding more equity.
Correct.
I mean, I used the wrong term here. Equity is another term that we use, but the balance, to get rid of property, you have to have sales or income tax. And your boss has been very flexible. I've had him on this program where he said, well, you know, I'll take this A, B, or C, but anything is better than a property tax. Is that pretty much your position, or almost anything is better than
Well, that we need to decrease our reliance on property taxes. I mean, I think that there's a reason that you have property taxes, but we are overly reliant as a state on property taxes as a way to fund the schools.
Is that why you've all not been real happy about some of the plans that get rid of all of it? And there are some
well,
that would get rid of all
the reason that we're not happy with the plan that gets rid of all of it is that the math doesn't work. The money to replace it doesn't cover the cost. So if there was a plan to get rid of all of it, that the math worked, I think we'd be very open to looking at it, because it's not a very equitable way to tax. Yeah. But right now, we also need to have a conversation about how do we both decrease the local tax burden by increasing the state share of funding for schools. And that's not a new conversation for Ed Rendell.
No, I understand. Yeah. And then in addition to that, you're looking for a new source of funding. I mean, I think if you're going to spend more money, even if you have accountability, that in itself is going to be a bit controversial, I think, and slipping into a recession if that's the case. All right, I want to go to another issue here, and that has to do with a word I used, in a sense, inappropriately, equity. When we talk about school equity, we mean something different. We mean about what the state gives to each school district compared to the local resources that they have to fund their own schools, and that's created imbalance. We had 2 years of a debate in the legislature over property taxes, almost none over that subject.
Right.
What say you about that?
Well, I think one of the reasons, Tara, is because actually, ironically, Pennsylvania's way of funding schools gives more money to districts with a high tax effort than a low tax effort. So there is actually a pretty skewed formula that helps communities that are taxing themselves high. The problem is there's not enough money going out to really relieve that.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks, as always, for coming in. All right, Tuesday, February 5, Governor gives his address to the General Assembly on the budget. Pay attention to it. See you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.